this lecture, we discuss the history of writing. This lecture connects to Chapter 3 of the Seidenberg book. As Seidenberg notes, the first thing to happen to reading was writing. In this first part of the lecture, we discuss the origins of writing. Writing is an integral part of our daily lives and is one of the most valuable skills humans ever developed. It allows us to share ideas, record our history, and communicate in new ways. For most of human history, we have not had writing. The beginnings of what later becomes writing is thought to be early humans' cave paintings. Our species' first attempts to record, share events, and their life in permanent form through cave paintings. The earliest cave paintings are thought to be around 30,000 years old. Modern writing systems evolved very slowly over many thousands of years, with the alphabetic system only being around for less than 5,000 years. Tens of thousands of years elapsed between depicting drawings and the emergence of writing. Writing is a relatively new skill in human evolution. We have not always had writing, and many languages still do not exist in a written form. About 9/10 of the world's 4,000 to 6,000 existing spoken languages have no indigenous or native written form. That's from Motes and Tolman, 2009. How did we evolve from painting pictures of our environment to writing about it? There are a huge number of writing systems, just like there are a number of oral languages, with vast visual diversity, and the differences influence how easy or difficult they are to read. The key similarity is that all represent spoken language. The development of writing systems was shaped by human capacity, cultural factors, and some accidents of geography and history, eventually resulting in a high degree of convergence in how they work. They are similar because we are similar, as are the functions and uses of writing and the way we read. Seidenberg, 2017. There are 4 main types of writing systems to broadly understand: pictograms, logographics, syllabic, and alphabetic. The first early writing systems were pictograms. Pictographs does not only equal pictures. They were more sophisticated, abstract than the cave drawings, as they were used to convey an item's name, representing a spoken word, not just recreating an image. The emojis of antiquity. Logographic systems use abstract symbols to reflect meaning, and these evolved to also have some connections to sound. Syllabic symbols directly represent whole syllables. Examples: Cherokee and Japanese kana. Japanese learned 2 different writing systems, one a syllabary system, kana, and the other a Chinese-influenced logographic system, kanji. The alphabet system represents consonants and vowels and individual phonemes. Examples would be the Greek alphabet and the Russian alphabet. The alphabets used today descend from a common mother alphabet, the Egyptian alphabet, that we'll talk about in part 2. How did this brilliant human creation originate? As Seidenberg recounts in Chapter 3, there are many unknowns about the first writing systems. What we do know is that writing evolved culturally across time. Independently, it was invented at least 4 different times: Sumeria, Egypt, China, and Mesoamerica. Overly burdensome systems became extinct, and more efficient systems thrived. Writing emerged as a way to overcome the limitations of representative drawings, as humans had a greater need to communicate messages of greater variety and precision based on new cultural advances: agriculture, trade, keeping records, etc. Writing evolved out of a need. Seidenberg describes the 4 events in the history of writing that are crucial for understanding the essential properties of how writing systems work. These can be seen in all writing systems in use today. The first was writing moved from depiction to symbol. Pictographs began to be used to represent language rather than objects. For example, using symbols to represent sound and not just concrete objects. The second was using writing to represent an entire language, taking the limited set of symbols and figuring out how to combine them to represent all aspects of language. The general solution was to use a combination of symbols that represent clues about sound and meaning. The third was discovering phonology, discovering that speech is made up of words, which are made up of syllables, which are made up of phonemes. Oral speech is a continuous stream of sounds. Today we take this for granted that speech is made up of units of sound, words, syllables, phonemes, that can be graphically represented. But that had to be discovered. The final event was establishing congruence. A spoken language and its representative writing system must share the same properties in order to be functional. For example, both the spoken and written form of language must have similar numbers of syllables, root structures, usage of consonants and or vowels, etc. Writing is a map of speech. We start by looking at our first writing systems and how they evolved. Early cuneiform consisted of pictographs, which represented an object. Pictographs did not necessarily have to reflect the likeness of its object, so the picture of a cat did not have to look like a cat. They did not have to be pictures at all, but could be random lines. Early cuneiform emerged at a surprisingly developed form because it was derived from an older, elaborate token system, also based on language rather than what it was referencing. Sumerian cuneiform represented the shift from graphical representation of objects to representation of language. Pictures are symbols that directly reflect meaning. These early systems changed dramatically across time. Look at the chart on page 37 in Seidenberg for an illustration of how cuneiform changed from 3000 BCE to 600 BCE. The surprising twist, as Seidenberg calls it, is that writing did not originate with pictures, and the pictures gradually became more abstract. Many were abstract to begin with, but rather writing evolved to using graphical elements in a radical new way to represent language. This was a great leap forward. This evolved into our modern writing systems. More advanced versions of cuneiform had some words represented by two symbols, a cue for meaning and a cue for sound. However, it is impossible to create enough signs and symbols to represent every word in a language, even by giving more than one meaning or function to a sign or by combining signs. Thus, cuneiform became a system that was monstrously complex. It is a testament to the Sumerian writing system that at least 15 peoples, including the early Persians, adopted cuneiform script. By 1600 BCE, no speakers of Sumerian remained, but the writing system remained in use until about 600 BCE, and its influence on the Akkadian writing system and the system that preceded cuneiform in Mesopotamia and other systems was apparent long after that. For many years, it was believed by scholars that the Sumerians invented the first writing system and that the Egyptian script was partly derived from cuneiform. Newer evidence suggests that an entirely independent writing system evolved in Egypt around 3100 BCE, or possibly 3400 BCE, before cuneiform. Egyptian hieroglyphics writing developed in a remarkably similar way, but was more sophisticated. Like cuneiform, the system evolved during its roughly 3,000 years of use. Egyptians developed hieroglyphs, largely logographic, and this evolved to represent initial consonant sounds, eventually including pictographs for the 24 consonants in the language, a major advance, a partial alphabet. Egyptian hieroglyphs grew over time to several thousand, making the writing system extremely demanding to learn, and thus fewer and fewer people learned to read and write. Despite the promise of the partial alphabet, the Egyptians themselves would never develop a full alphabet. But this might prove to be, as Dr. Wolf says, the single most important contribution to the evolution of the alphabet in the early history of writing systems. In Mesoamerica, the Indus writing system developed around the same time as the Sumerian and Egyptian systems. It evolved from potter's marks to full script. Script remains undecipherable today, however. In ancient China, the Chinese writing system is dated around 1500 to 1200 BCE. Some scholars believe it existed much earlier as well. The earliest script was written on turtle shells and bones, thought to be questions to the gods. Just as the Sumerians and Egyptian systems, sound evolved into the writing system. A small marker accompanies many of the most common characters to give information about a syllable's pronunciation. There are several ways the Chinese system differs from the other ancient writing systems. First of all, unlike the others, it still exists today. Second, it has a little alphabet called pinyin that is learned first by young children. This helps children grasp the concepts of reading and writing to prepare them to learn the 2,000 characters by 5th grade. Quite an accomplishment. There is also a very old Chinese writing system used only by women that was completely based on a phonetic translation of the sounds of Chinese words. Nu Shu writing, or female writing. This is from Wolf, 2007. To understand the modern alphabetic writing system used in English, our next lecture will pick up with the birth and development of an alphabetic writing system. It is important to remember that there remains a vast number of writing systems that are logographic, syllabic, as well as alphabetic. They all represent spoken language, and their properties are important to understand for their influence on how we learn and teach reading. Understanding the history of writing illustrates that reading and writing are remarkable human inventions